on a collision course in a high-stakes yacht race. That heavy book of rules you spent hours studying or even taking classes on says you have the absolute undeniable rights. So you think. Another arriving boat asserts that they have the rights. But you hold your course, feeling confident and maybe even a little smug. A few seconds later, that confidence is shattered by the sound of a collision and panic shouting, maybe even pain. A protest flag pops out on their boat. Or yours. Or both. Congratulations, you've just starred in your own yacht racing incident. Alright, racing sailors, let's talk about the one thing that gives us more heartburn than a rogue wave. The risk of collision. Of course, the official international regulations for preventing collisions at sea, called the Cull Regs, are essential. They are the legal bedrock of safe navigation. But here's the critical truth. Relying on the letter of them alone is a dangerously naive mistake. Never mind racing. Studies have shown that a staggering 75 to 96% of all accidents at sea are caused by human error, not some random equipment failure. Aside from just pure negligence, we're talking about lack of knowledge, inattention, or just not keeping an intelligent lookout. This, followed by an informal poll that we took of about 40 racing sailors, that discovered that about 25% of them felt that if they were in the right, they would proceed with a collision anyways. Well, okay then. With a success rate and consensus like that, how could there be any hope of getting out unscathed? So, let's talk about that for a bit. The authors of the Cull Regs anticipated this dilemma and built in an often misunderstood and overlooked provision into the rules. This provision is what I call the common sense rule, and is part of the racing rules of sailing as well. And I don't want you to just take my word for it. I'll show you photos of the actual rules book text, as well as point of view footage, not just models on a board, that describe the example wherever possible. With this real-time point of view footage, you can not only get a feel for the typical scenario, but perhaps more importantly, the speed at which you need to be able to learn to adjudicate them. You'll see that sometimes you just have a second or two to evaluate and make the right decision. But first, if you like this, please click the like, the notify, and subscribe, and you'll get plenty more of this, as well as bookmarks to the videos I've already created on this. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. In this video, we will focus on the representation of these situations from the standpoint of the racing rules of sailing. It's not that they contradict the Cull Regs, but the racing rules of sailing have added sporting fairness provisions that add some different angles that are important to understand. I'm going to call these racing rules the RRS from here on out. An example of why I'm doing this is the notion of mark room, which doesn't exist in the Cull Regs. And on the Cull Reg side, there are provisions for things like traffic separation schemes and upbound, downbound right-of-way that don't really apply to racing situations. Trying to focus on both at the same time for this topic will be confusing, I believe. While the intent between them is roughly the same, some of the words used are also slightly different. Example, keep out of the way versus keep clear. And also the rule numbers that are assigned are also different. I like to recognize my racecourse interactions by rule number. For me, it helps me to understand the entire context better. Also, when we're communicating as a team out on the water, we each know that common context by just blurting out one number, and everybody knows with minimal misunderstanding. So we have a system of mnemonics that we use that make it so easy to remember what the rule numbers are and what they mean. You'll never forget them again. I'll cover that in another video, so stay tuned. I'm also going to use the terms give way for the boat that must keep clear and boat with rights for the boat that does not need to keep clear. Those of you who are well familiar with both the call regs and the RRS know that this is a simplification, but I think it's a suitable one for our purposes today. I have another video which talks about the differences between some of these definitions in the call regs and RRS that I'll put a link to in the comments. There are significant things that cause confusion there as well. It's worth a looky-see and some research, especially if you sail in areas with commercial traffic. Ultimately, I think it's critical to know both of them. These secrets aren't about tossing the rules overboard. It's about reading them carefully and pulling out the defensive tactics that the pros use every time they cast off their lines. It's understanding the intended purpose by the authors that cares more about safety than about being dead right. Good race committees or protest hearing juries will always prefer the safety-minded skipper. We're going to walk through what I have seen are the 3 most common racing collision scenarios and reveal how some common sense tactics reinforce this often overlooked rule to keep you out of the protest room, deserving your fair place in the race, and more importantly, out of the boatyard. Now, there are other ways to collide, of course. And I always say that there's a new way invented with every incident, but today we're just going to stick with these. Remember, we're talking about how to avoid collisions, not so much about what causes them. So let's kick things off with the most basic and highest in priority rule in sailing. Port tack gives way to starboard tack. If you're on port tack, wind on your left, boom on your right. You have to stay clear of a boat on starboard tack. Here is the main RRS page that contains this rule. Note the language, but also the lack of language as well. I think that this is telling. Take a look at the Rule 10 duck, as we call it. The port tack boat ducks the boat on starboard, sometimes dramatically. But here's the dangerous reality. What if that skipper on port tack doesn't see you? What if they're wrestling with a foul sheet? Or looking at another collision situation somewhere? Or they're just plain inexperienced? Maybe they're a competitor trying to bully you into tacking when you don't tactically want to, so they get an unfair advantage. If you just stubbornly hold your course, you're betting your entire boat and the safety of your crew and risk forfeiting it all. Crossing paths under Rule 10 involved, I think, is probably the most likely place for the most serious collisions to happen. Now this brings us to our first unwritten rule, and that is never assume that you've been seen and never press your rights into a dangerous spot. Even with the boat with rights, your number one job is to still avoid a collision. Let me back that statement up. The Call Regs says this in Rule 2, as does the RRS in Rule number 14, with slightly different wording. Take a close look at RRS Rule 14. It essentially states that you can and should break the rule if you need to avoid immediate danger. So it's saying we need to break a rule to keep a rule? Now that seems like a contradiction, but it's really not. Great sailors burn this into their brains. They're constantly scanning, not just for other boats, but at the people in those boats. Is the helmsman looking the other way? Do they look aware? Do they have any doubt at all? It's on you to act then. As I've mentioned already, I found that 25% of a poll said that they would still hold a course even if it caused a collision. Remember that if there's a collision with either damage or injury, both boats are required to retire from the race. The secret isn't to clench your teeth and just hold your course until the last possible second. I believe it is to make an earlier, obvious hail and maneuver that de-escalates the situation, even if you think you're in the right where it is not technically required. Remember, your insurance company and your crew would much rather thank you for dodging the bullet than for proving you were technically right. You may not know all the facts in the situation, and indeed may be wrong because of something you just can't see. I'm the first to say that's certainly happened to me. When I'm in this situation, I hail and indicate the rule number involved. That way the other skipper knows that I know why I'm asserting what I believe are my rights. It's not required to do that, but at least I say it aloud so that the rest of Sailing Team Tally-Ho and the other skipper on the other boat can hopefully hear it and understand where I'm coming from. When you think about it, it's really the same as driving a motor vehicle. Usually sans the hailing, but not always. Would it ever make sense to collide with a vehicle and then try to convince an officer or an insurance claim adjuster you did it because you thought you were in the right? Not to me. If you're truly convinced that you had to unjustly change course, and congratulations if you are, you have every right to hail a protest and fly a flag to settle it later. If you don't do that and collide, you yourself risk being disqualified in violation of Rule 14. Just for starters. But remember that the port starboard rule is one of the highest in the hierarchy, and you have a good chance of winning the protest. Next up, the do-si-do between two boats on the same tack. The rule is pretty clear. The windward boat, the one that's closer to the wind, must keep clear of the leeward boat. The leeward boat is the boat with the rights. This rule is there to help the boat that is farther downwind and in theory has less maneuverability to navigate. Rule number 11. And here it is in the RRS book. The trouble usually begins at a crowded race start. A windward boat might just try to shoot a gap that's just too tight, or a leeward boat might just luff up hard and yell up, up, up to force the windward boat away. And suddenly it's a high-stakes game of chicken. Sticking strictly to the rulebook here can easily lead to shouting matches and expensive noises. And that gives us our second unwritten rule. Communicate early and own your space. And this rule is a two-edged sword. Racing Rule 16.1 states that a right-of-way boat must give a give-way boat room to keep clear. The leeward boat just can't do whatever it wants. Great racing etiquette is more about just knowing or reciting rules. It's proactive communication as well. Don't wait until you're in a tight spot. If you're the leeward boat, instead of waiting for the rub rails to scrape, a friendly but clear leeward boat call or a simple, unambiguous hand signal can wake up the other skipper long before things get dicey. This isn't about being aggressive, it's about creating clarity. And for the windward boat, respect that space. Don't try to be that guy who forces it. Give the leeward boat a wide enough berth, and if you are the leeward boat, give the other a chance to respond. It isn't that uncommon that the windward boat protests and wins. Also, know how well your boat maneuvers given the conditions involved. When both skippers know what the other one is doing, the risk tends to evaporate. Like with the port and starboard rule, if you are convinced that you were wronged on a race and had to unwillingly change course to prevent a collision, you can always hail protest and fly a flag. That's what it's for. Now I'm going to talk about two of the trickiest clauses, in my opinion, that only have meaning in the RRS. They're not in the call regs, and that is proper course and mark room. I'm going to lump them together in this video for simplicity. In some recent informal research I did of some protest hearing appeals, I found that roughly 75% of the collisions in a race occurred when these two rule clauses were involved. Here is the section of the racing rules book that talks about mark room. Here is the section of the racing rules book that talks about proper course. The danger here is all the fuzzy phrases themselves. What do they really mean? As you can see, the details are complicated. A lot more words in them than rules 10 and 11. So complicated that they are often interpreted differently between different competent skippers, especially in the heat of the moment. Do I have overlap at the zone? Was I too late? Is the other boat bullying me? Sometimes it's not so clear. I think it's important to remember that ultimately, the interpretation of the rules falls not to you, nor to the other skipper involved, but to the members of the hearing that would take place if there's a protest, especially if there's a collision. You may not have a lot to say in the outcome in the long run. This leads us to unwritten rule number 3. Declare or accept an overlap or rights to the mark room with an abundance of communication with the other boats involved. There's that communication thing again. The secret here is to make your actions impossible to misinterpret. As every seasoned competitor knows, predictability equals safety. A safe leeward mark is boring, but boring is beautiful. If you think you were bullied, change course to give them room per Rule 14 as we've already stated, and hail a protest and fly a flag. This isn't just about folding and losing. Mastering these unwritten rules is really about adopting a mindset, a culture of safety that lives beyond the pages of a book. It's about seeing the whole picture, over-communicating without ambiguity, and always putting your crew and your boat first. If this resonated with you and you want more tips with real-life footage, become a safer, more confident sailor, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Now, we want to hear from you. Sharing what we've learned makes us all safer out on the water. Drop a comment below with your own close call story and the unwritten rule it taught you. So what's the single secret rule to avoid disaster? As you've probably figured out, it's not some magic trick. The ultimate secret is a philosophy. The number one rule is to avoid the collision, no matter who has the right of way. So study the rules carefully, but always be ready to take action that may not follow what you think the rules say should happen. And I like to win races too. This isn't just about unjustly giving in. I've also included some other links to some very good expert opinion content in the comments. But until then, thanks for watching, and go get 'em on the race course. And stay out of trouble!